David with you. You know, I've been doing this series on what it takes to become a master criminal. And just as I was about to add part 4 for the series, of how to become a master criminal, a world leader has stepped up to provide a masterclass for all. Yes, there could be few better examples of ruthlessness, cunning, deception, manipulation, and power beyond riches. He wants power more than all. Putin has cut all those before him, taken all, deceived even his own top men, and then done away with them when they didn't live up to expectations. And done what the top criminals only dream of, and make all the laws of his land bow to his wishes. Any aspiring criminal could only admire his skills, surely. And it's just too bad Putin's an imbecile. Hi, David McMillan here, former something or other, smuggler I guess I was doing, mischief making. But here, I've just made Putin a glowing example of the master criminal, but I rather had a go at him at the end of it. Okay, Putin is very much in the public eye. Now, that goes against rule number 8 of the Master Criminal Handbook. I'm penning that now. But we can let that go, since in Russia being brutal to one's enemies, blatantly and in public, is a thing to be admired by all. So his ability to travel unhindered was already a matter of careful security. Now, of course, having launched a disastrous war inside Ukraine and brought down sanctions that the world has never before applied since, I don't know what, Mehmed II besieged Constantinople in the 1400s, Putin will never again travel beyond Russia, I feel. Even a flight to Beijing would... What was he going there for? I guess to hand over the keys. Even that flight might be too risky. So, if his Ukraine adventure was such a blunder, why do I rate him so highly in the criminal field? Well, few take the trouble to look at Putin's rise to power, and I'll give you a little potted biography for about 5 minutes. He was born in Leningrad in 1952. He didn't meet his older brothers. They died young, one of them, Victor, during the siege of Leningrad during World War II, due to the stranglehold of German armies Group North. He lost other family members too. That was nothing exceptional for just about anybody in the Great Patriotic War, in which 20 million people died. But here's the thing. Putin went and learned German at school as a second language. German? After the Nazis? Understand your enemy. That's certainly part of the Master Criminal's Guide. He speaks a little English, of course. Sings it too. Have you heard that? I always wonder about the English chit-chat with China's Premier, Xi. I must get a lip reader in. By the way, Putin studied law at university, but that means nothing in the Soviet system other than, well, we have law but interpret it as it suits power. I know you're thinking, well, we do exactly the same thing in the West. Not quite. Our law might not be the famed golden thread of justice, but it does take different sides from time to time. It's not all one way, despite my best efforts. Anyway, Putin enlisted in the KGB in his early 20s, but he was never a spy. Don't get the idea that he was some dark sorcerer within the KGB. For 10 years, that's a long time, until 1985, he was posted to dead-end departments in the service, paper shuffling through his 20s. During that time, he married a calm and accepting girl, Lyudmila, and they're separated now with 2 daughters, but on good terms. Mind you, what other terms could there be with Vladimir? Even a transfer back then to Dresden in, 85, that was dull. A Russian friend tells me that he merely ran social events for the party and consular service, like a little in-house club. But the point is this: Putin wasn't stationed in the West. Almost 15 years of drudgery with no stimulus, no great understanding of the greater world. I expect he did a lot of daydreaming. He certainly never distinguished himself in any way. The Berlin Wall began crumbling in 89. Putin was sent back to Leningrad, that's today's St. Petersburg, having taken back the city's old name. In 1991, Premier Gorbachev, the one with the stain, was almost ousted following an army coup attempt, and Boris Yeltsin became the first president of the new Russian Federation. The Soviet Union was no more, and former satellite countries peeled away to become independent. Where was Putin? He drove taxis for a stint before getting a job as a fixer to the city mayor of St. Petersburg, Anatoly Sobchak. Sobchak was Putin's old law professor, so he could rely on Putin arranging the kickbacks and payoffs. Don't get all this talk of law professors and PhDs to mean anything grand about education there, not the kind he had. All that background meant only that Putin and his university circle could talk the talk of law and higher ideas. All of them were scoundrels and cheats, in school and out. I'm not complaining about that, but don't get distracted. Even so, Putin was loyal enough to the mayor and learned how to work a table of card players, as it were. He ran the mayor's re-election campaign. The mayor lost, and Putin resigned from his half a dozen St. Petersburg positions through the mayor's office. He moved to Moscow in 1996 and finagled a prime job. He was handling the sale of the foreign property and assets of the former Soviet Union to the new Russian Federation, or to somebody. All the hidden houses and bases spread around the old Soviet republics. For the first time, Putin was a man with some kind of international influence, or international anyway, even if limited to assets in places like Ukraine, of course, Georgia, Belarus, Uzbekistan, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, one of my favorites, and lands east. Putin had something to sell apart from talk. He then shoehorns himself into President Yeltsin's office. Another key move. This is 1998. Putin is just 36, but dull and boring as he is, he's been soaking up the changes as Yeltsin stumbled through those first years of freedom, hope, and perestroika, which were, as you know, the years when the giant state companies of the Soviet era were passed on to those we call oligarchs. The term means rule by the few. I used to think it meant rule by the oily, oligarch. Anyway, here's some of them. These are familiar names to crook watchers, like Roman Abramovich, Oleg Deprieska, Uzmanov, Vladimir Putin, Mikhail Prokhorov, Gennady Timchenko, Oleg Perov, and Peter Avil, I think. Oh, I shouldn't forget Arkady Rottenberg. You'll get to hear about him some places he's hiding. The oligarchs are former officials, a family of officials, a few high-level crooks, well, not many, or as high as a crook could get in the old Soviet Union. Keep in mind the law that Putin had studied or talked about. That law had no place for private ownership of things. And those oligarchs who managed to survive the 1998 Russian financial crisis, it wiped out quite a few bankers, they would be in Putin's sights. And it is from here that Putin, now jamming in the blocks that would see him all the way to his first presidency, decides he will no longer be the loyal fixer as he was for the mayor of St. Petersburg. It was Boris Yeltsin in July 1998 who appointed Putin director of the FSB, the security service. and the successor to the KGB, the FSB. The same Yeltsin who put him up as acting president following the old man's sudden resignation. Here's a picture, a modest-looking Putin with the hard-drinking Yeltsin on resignation night. Putin, modest but determined. It is from there, 1999, that Putin shows why he deserves the master criminal title. Was any of it technically a crime, you ask? Yes, even under Russian law, things that were going on were crimes. And you'll see, Putin doesn't stop to thank anyone he's climbed upon or who's lifted him high. Even on the night of Putin's first presidential win, he didn't bother to even phone Yeltsin, who sat around embarrassed for an hour or so with his family. Didn't even phone him to say thanks for the ride. Putin, he was barely known when he was pushed onto the stage of the new Russia, but he used his wide contacts to good effect. He wanted to be seen as a strong man, a hard man, in the apparently lawless new Russia. He needed a showy victory against terrorists, and if only some terrorists were to hand. Now, of course, when people, especially in the West, need a terrorist today, they find a beard and glue it on some dead kid and call him an Islamist bomber. But this was Russia in 1999, party over. The public perception of terrorists were in the form of Chechens. Chechens, you say? Who the fuck are Chechens? You don't know. Well, unless you've been reminded this last week. Somehow a phrase of Hitler's comes to mind, and actually it's the only phrase of his I do know. He said, "Who, after all, speaks today of the annihilation of the Armenians?" He supposedly said that when talking about his plans for the Poles in 1939. Yes, it was the Ottoman Empire that wiped out, huge millions of Greek-speaking Armenians. Why? Look it up, if you like your Holocausts. Anyway, the Chechens, who are they? Terrorists in Russia at the time. After the Soviet Union broke up, Chechens are still part of Russia. Some angry Chechen cadets with twisted faces, a downed Russian chopper. You're going to see a few of those, and you probably already had. Oh, and cities bombed to shit. Or was that last picture actually Aleppo in Syria? It is a bit of a Russian thing, staying up high and blowing the hell out of stuff. I don't know whether they picked up the idea from the Americans in Vietnam. I don't think so. I think it was developed. What did the Ukrainians say? They fight like it's 1941. Anyway, I don't quite think so. Don't worry, there's plenty more of these sort of images coming from Ukraine in the next weeks if you like a bit of wreckage. So, back to the Chechens. Putin wants to be seen as tough, as his FSB ex-KGB pals arrange 4 apartment block bombings in Moscow as well, and Volgodonsk in September 1999. That last city, Volgodonsk, it was a little careless with that. It was announced as being the target of a bombing in the Russian parliament. They call it the Duma. Announced as a terror bombing actually the day before it was bombed. Here's the thing with a lot of Putin's moves. They are brutal, yet extraordinarily clumsy and careless. Now look at those Novichok poisonings. God. Anyway, Putin has just come back from the war zone, gets tough, says he'll kill the terrorists even while they're taking a crap. I notice around this time in his life he starts to sprinkle some Russian criminal slang. It's called Fenya, or Latinoid language sometimes. As an aside, I got my first Russian language interest from reading the novel A Clockwork Orange by Master Fabulous Anthony Burgess. He used a concoction of half Russian words as the private language of teenage hoodlums in the UK in some imaginary 1960s. Horosho. And Putin, of course, he wants to seem like a tough guy, so he misuses this slang, and when using Fenya, he often gets the phrasing kind of mixed up. So it's not really in his blood, is it? He does it in a way that no blatnoy or professional criminal would. Onward, an early election in March 2000 saw Putin ahead with 54% of the vote. He did his first 4 years, ran again in 2004, and came up with 74% of the vote. Despite the expectancy in Russia, expectancy of living, the life expectancy in Russia actually dropped during his first term. Now, anyone of influence who supported the opposition was hounded. It's the master criminal's maxim that the cost of pursuing one's enemies should be borne by the culprit himself. That is, make he who it is that you hunt, make him pay for the bullets. So it was with the then richest tycoon, the chief of Yukos Oil and Gas, Mikhail Khodorkovsky. He was jailed, made bankrupt, had his property taken by the Russian government company Rostheft. There's a solid documentary of the pursuit of Khodorkovsky on Prime Video. It's Russian, of course, mostly, but with adequate subtitling. Look, a top-level master criminal need not even directly ask that his wishes, even murders, are carried out. FSB stringers gave Putin a birthday present on October the 7th in 2006 by shooting a journalist who had exposed corruption. She was shot in the lobby of her apartment building. A thoughtful birthday gift, some might think, but Putin has since said that her death caused more problems than all of her published accusations. I don't suppose Putin's the first mafia don whom half-wits tried to impress by foolish public slaughter. But there's the question of control. Does he really have it? And that bungled assassination attempt in Salisbury by nerve agent poisoning, the Novichok of Sergei and his daughter, what was her name? Yulia Skripal. And that was done by the main directorate, also known as the GRU, of the Military Intelligence Service of the Russian Federation. Skripal, exiled double agent, was on Putin's hit list, but in a departure, in my view, from the true master criminality, Putin wanted it seen that the traitor was punished by him. Skripal and daughter actually survived, while other Salisbury officials and locals were poisoned, one fatally. The agents were named and appeared absolutely lame in an interview talking about seeing Salisbury Cathedral while they were there as tourists. I mean, look at them. The Russian constitution at the time prohibited Putin from running for a third term. So he brought in a stooge and his former school chum, Dmitry Medvedev, to be elected, while Vladimir himself gritted his veneered teeth and suffered those 4 years as prime minister. Even so, you can see Putin pulling the strings at every stroke. And it was a pity in a way, because Medvedev is more liberal and certainly smarter than Putin. Those 4 years in the wilderness, a 4-inch wilderness between the two of them standing there, Putin was back in 2012, where he won a term until 2018. But he has since changed the constitution so he can take another 2 6-year terms from 2024. That would take him into, 2036, if he keeps control of the balloting system, which he will, lonely as he might be. I suspect other matters may prevent that long-term expectation he has. That aside, there are vanities at play in Putin's world, and in his mind, that must take away a few of those stripes he's earned as a master criminal. Sure, his criminal strokes are not subtle, they're public and too obvious, and not all have been intentionally obvious. Some are simply ham-fisted brutality or bungling, never a masterstroke. While the savage killing of lawyer Sergei Magnitsky, a tax accountant who accused Russian tax officials and the police as well of stealing $230 million in tax rebates from Hermitage Capital, his killing, Magnitsky's killing, was meant to be an example to others. He was beaten to death in a prison cell. It led to Western laws, though, made in retribution. Many of them called the Magnitsky Act, whichever country it is. That is folly. The whistleblower could have been silenced before his accusations reached court. The master criminal acts before the courts get a chance to act. And Putin's prime vanity, really a greater explosion of puffiness than that face he's currently got. I'm thinking it's courtesy of Berlusconi's age doctors' ministrations. Now, the real puff of vanity with wanting to be the man in history who restored the borders of post-war Soviet Russia, including Ukraine. That must have been, well, part of his daydreams when he spent those years at a KGB filing desk. Of course, a hillbilly can be the master of the Appalachian underworld, and a boy with a knife can be king of the old Tversky Square in Russia. But Putin has no grasp of the powers of the world, the ways of the world outside his walls. And he is unwise to trade on ignorance and the fading strength of the Soviet-era hammer. As to a legacy, unlike Putin, the master criminal wants nothing after his death. Well, other than it be avenged, of course. And avenged silently. Unfortunately, though Putin's ways were master criminal-like, he has ended himself. Unfortunately, Putin was a nobody daydreamer who learned well and ruthlessly got into a fine position. But, like so many before him, it's gone into his mind that he should have a legacy of some imperial greatness. And incredibly, no one seems to watch the obvious lesson that no one can survive that. Nobody becomes Putin the Great. Maybe history will do him a favor, but I don't think so. Not in this age. There's lots to say about Ukraine, but frankly, I'm too annoyed to take a flippant tone just this week. Instead, I'll be having an interview with two Russians. This week coming before YouTube is blocked in Russia, Misha Fira, known from Quora, I don't know if you know it, Quora is a kind of Q&A website that people kind of pose their own questions and then ask them. Anyway, Misha was pretty well known there, and an interview with him and his brother, Z-fan and Z-head, Ivan Brutalski, volunteer on the front, booted and suited, the big Z proudly in hand, yes, a true Russian patriot. He'll be on as well. Well, I think his commander sold all the logos on that one, so he might be a bit short of supplies. And in the next couple of weeks, I've researched what taking out a contract on Vladimir himself would need to succeed. And what would be the effects? Maybe not what you'd hope. Look at the German military during World War II. They only wanted Hitler dead when he started losing.